For this sequence, we're going to be discussing the Pleiades, Orion, Hesperus, and lastly Arcturus. Now, let's take note here that the Septuagint's order is thus. It says the Pleiades, and then it says Hesperus, and then it says Arcturus. And I want you to keep your eyes on this locality. Now take note that the Pleiades there is marked off as the shoulder point of the bull. And their sisters, the other set of clusters, the Hyades, of course, is right there around the area of the right eye of the bull, right down and below it. So take note that the ecliptic lies directly between these two clusters of sisters. One group formerly known as good sisters, one group formerly known as bad sisters. But please take note that the equator is right there on Orion's belt. And we're going to walk this through here so that you can see exactly why this would be the order in the Septuagint. You'll take note that the first thing that marks off the point in the heavens is, of course, the setting of the sisters. So, lock your eye on that point. The next point we want to come to is Mercury and Vesta. Vesta, of course, is another representation in the heavens of the woman. You also take note here that on this day that Mercury is directly in the horns of the bull. We all know that term, taking the bull by the horns, but also take note the reference to the Messiah crushing the head of Satan. So let us move on, progress through the night. You'll take note that at that same point where the clusters went down, it's exactly the same point in the heavens that the Venus becomes Hesperus. You'll take note. That's exactly what happens. Now, if you keep your eye on that point, now we're going to jump through a couple of hours so you can see why the order is the way that it is. Here, you'll take note this would be right before sundown. You will take note that your vantage point is going to put Arcturus setting last in the exact same spot in the heavens. Now, you'll take note that by this time you cannot see the ecliptic. Remember what is said here, the chambers of the south. Let's walk it back so you can see it. Keep your eye on the equator and the ecliptic. In the beginning, this point in the heavens is, of course, in the northern parts. But by the time this sign completes itself in its entirety on the day of the sign of the strike, you will take note that here, right at the bride, you see where the equator crosses the ecliptic. So the last thing that you see set in that very point in the heavens is Arcturus, but now it has become the chambers of the south. So now let us take a look one more time at the verse in question. It is Job 9, verse 9. I have laid out all of the alphanumerics here, as well as the Strong's numbers and, of course, the parsing information. But you'll take note that a lot of this I've had to do myself. Just take a look there at a couple of different things that I had to go and get the words for, such as Arcturus. That is actually G715 and G3772. That is actually a compound proper name. So These numbers here, it's the first time you're seeing them. They're not in any Strong's or any other dictionary. But just take note of what God has done here alphanumerically. It is amazing. I want to point one thing out to you right now, that in the Hebrew, or in the ones as I like to speak, because the Bible source code is a series of ones and zeros. The ones represent the Hebrew and the zeros represents the Greek. So let us take note here that the royal alphanumerical count for this verse is 2314. And marvelously enough, that word is used in the verse H2314. Of course, that same exact word is used for 3 separate Strong's entries, but just take note of that. And I also want you to see that I have taken a strange way of translating this, because I want you to see, especially the second word there in the verse in the Hebrew, that is actually moth. It does not have a yod in the middle of it. That's what it would be if it was actually bear. It does not have that. It's been removed. You will take note that at the end of the verse, God does the same thing. Normally, there would be a yod in that word. So, you will take note that he has removed the yods out of both of these words. It makes it very interesting. And I want you to realize that Orion here, we can translate this either way. It can either be Orion or it can be constellations. Just take note that most translators will go ahead and translate this as Orion, but it does mean any translation. And H3598 for Pleiades. Please take note that that word is actually clusters. And when you realize that the only time the word moth is used is in reference to moths eating and destroying at a very particular place in time. And take note that south there, it can also be either or. It can either be south or Teman. And this makes things extremely interesting when you just look even at the alphanumerics of this verse. It becomes very interesting to look at. But understand the reason why the Septuagint gives you that sequence is Pleiades and Hesperus, and then Arcturus it was actually wanting you to concentrate on that particular point in the heavens on sundown in the constellation of Orion. So when we open things up, we realize that prophetically speaking, this singular verse is off the charts. Now, if you think that God was writing via the Septuagint, and that is what is the authorized original language, you will fail to see the order. However, if you believe only that the Hebrew is the authorized translation language, you would have missed a whole lot. It is both forms and both fashions which we get the whole picture. That it is in Orion because you realize that the Greek and the Hebrew swaps places. Just take note of that. That where the Greek puts the Pleiades in the Hebrew, it swaps that out for Orion. So, or I'm sorry, Hesperus. So literally speaking, through just looking at this and just having a little bit of faith that God was actually giving us ones and zeros, an actual Bible source code with which we could obtain deeper and broader truth, we are able to see the sign of the strike in just one verse. And it took both verses to convey that particular code to us.